Hello, my name is Kristin Skinner, and I work in the Material Culture Department at Ford House. Ford House is a historic estate of Edsel and Eleanor Ford. It's a home full of stories where Edsel and Eleanor raised their 4 children, and today it's a National Historic Landmark. We're inviting you today to wonder, learn, and explore with us. In celebration of the summer solstice, I'm going to show you how to make a Sun English paper-pieced mini-quilt wall hanging, inspired by the objects in the Ford House collection. As you can see, I've gathered a list of materials, and I've included suggestions that you can use for things at home. Now let's get started. So for the template, I would have printed it on cardstock and then cut all of the shapes out, and I would cut on the outside of the black lines so that I would have 8 of these and 1 of these. So I'm going to show you how to do the triangle to cut the shape out, and you'll want to use your ruler and do 1/4 of an inch on all sides. The triangles are not equilateral exactly, so you want to make sure that you are cutting on the right side. So there is my triangle template with 1/4 of an inch on all sides, and I will do that the same way for the octagon. And now to start gluing, I am going to make sure that the cutout shape in the template is aligned correctly, and I'm going to center that. And I'm going to take my glue stick. Now at this point, it is good to make sure that you're not using too much glue, because we're actually going to be removing the templates. So what I like to do is to dot on the fabric, and then we're going to start from the middle and fold up at the base. I'm going to do this side first. Again, not using too much glue, and carefully folding some more glue dots, starting in the middle. And since this is the last fold, I like to make sure that I'm folding everything the right way. So there's one of the triangles. And the only tail we really have to worry about is this one. When we applique, we're just going to be tucking it in. I'm going to do the center sun now. Again, I'm going to want to put it in the center, and then with any shape that is not like a triangle and has, multiple sides, I always do the opposites. So I'll start here and then do this one. Then I'll go up here and then do that one, that one, that one. So now we get to start actually doing the sewing portion of the English paper piecing method. I'm going to take the center of the ray, and then the center of the sun, and then one of the rays, and I want these tails on the bottom to be behind. See how they line up? And I'm going to pin them right sides together. I'm going to make sure that I align. I think it's better to see it this way. I make sure that this is the same height. I'm aligning the sides together. I'm going to hold that, and I'm going to take my clips, and I'm going to clip on both sides. So it will look like this. I'm going to take my milliner's needle and my thinner thread, and I don't want to have too long of a thread because it'll be easier to knot if it's longer. And a trick, one of my favorite tricks of sewing, I'm going to show you how to do the quilter's knot. So you're going to want to take your needle and hold it like this with the eye pointed down, and then take your long end of your thread, and we're going to grab it, the end, the tail, between our thumb and index, and then I'm going to wrap it around the needle about 4 or 5 times. And then I'm going to grab all of those wraps in my other hand, and I'm going to pull it down. As you can see, I made a little knot. So now we are going to start whip stitching the side with the ray and the sun. I'm going to start right down here, the tip, and with this you only want to grab a couple of threads at a time from each side of the fabric. So a couple of threads from this side and a couple of threads from this side, and pull it through, not too tight. Pretty close stitches, because if you leave a larger gap, like say you only do like 5 stitches on this whole thing, when you turn it over, you'll be able to see through, and it's better to kind of do them close together. As you can see, I just did one there, and I'm going to go about this far ahead and grab a couple of stitches from each side and then pull it through. So I'm going to go ahead and do that down this entire edge. So now that I have whip stitched all of the triangles on, the shape will look like this. And now we need to remove these templates. I have pressed just to make sure that these creases will stay, and I'll be able to easily turn the fabric over without the templates. So to remove the templates, I'm going to carefully peel back the fabric. And this is when the seam ripper will also come in handy to get underneath, and this is why you don't want to use too much glue. I'll get underneath and out, and then I'm going to try to take one of the pieces out. And you can see that this isn't in too rough a shape. I can always reuse this, and I didn't sew in the paper. You don't want to sew in the paper. And so when I turn it over, I'll still have a crease, and when I applique, I'll just be turning everything over, including this tail. I'll be turning it under. So I'm going to do that, the tail under. So I'm going to do all of these pieces and take them out, and then I'll take the center out the same way. So I have pressed and pinned the sun to where I want it on the background, and all of the flags, the little points are in except for the ones on the outside, but I will show you how to tuck them in. So I'm going to take my milliner's needle again and some yellow thread to match the sun, and I'm going to start at this corner in the back and bring my needle up and catch a little bit of the fabric. It's not too important that it shows, and then going back down and then up. I think that might be an eighth of an inch, and then back down. So I'm going to do this all the way to the end. So now that I have sewn to the end of the first point, I'm now going to fold this end in, this point in. So I'm going to lift up and then tuck under. So I have appliqued the sun onto the background now, and I've made the quilt sandwich by placing the background appliqued piece on top of my batting, which you can also use an old towel or old cotton or wool blanket, and then on top of my backing piece. And I have pin basted all around. You can also use safety pins. I just prefer these pins since it's not too thick. And I have also drawn or traced my quilting lines. I'm going to do one line around the sun, I have used this ruler to trace about a 1/4 of an inch line all the way around using my Hera marker. And this makes the dent in the fabric. You can also use the blunt end of a butter knife, just not the serrated, just like the curved, and that will also trace lines. So now I am going to begin quilting. I'm going to be using embroidery thread. I thought that would look nice and it matches the yellow. So embroidery floss comes in 6 threads. I'm using 3 because I want the line to be chunky. You don't have to, you can use whatever kind of thread you want, but I want the line to be kind of thick to be more decorative quilting stitches. And then my embroidery needles. Now since this is a thin quilt, I am going to go thin and little. I'm going to kind of cheat and go in between the backing and batting so that the knot will get stuck in the batting. I made a quilter's knot at the end, so then it will be buried and I can just start right on stitching. And I am going to choose to do the chunkier stitches, so maybe like 1/8 or 1/4 inch apart and long. So I'm going to kind of just rock back and forth, oops, and not get stuck in the needle. Just take that out, or the pin. So there's 2 stitches. I'm going to do that all the way around the sun. So I finished quilting through all 3 layers, as you can see on the background. And I have also trimmed the batting and the background fabric so that it's the same width and height. And I've also trimmed it so that there is 1 inch of the background on all sides. And I've also started folding over the binding, which is why you want to leave 1 inch around all sides. So to do the binding, I'm going to fold in half to meet the backing or the batting and the sun, and then fold in half so it goes over those layers. And then I'm going to clip, and you can use clips or clothespins or binder clips, or even, you know, these regular pins will work too. So I'm going to make sure that it's all folded on both sides before I try to do the corner, which the corner takes a little bit of working the fabric to where you want it to go. So I've pinned it pretty close and I folded it. So now I'm going to bring this corner in, doing one side at a time, and then fold it in and then fold it over. So you can see that, don't mind this side, you can see that it makes a fold right there. So then this end, I'm going to make sure that it's folded, and then, oops, let me move this pin down. We are going to do kind of the same thing. So that looks pretty good to me. Folding it in, I'm going to put a pin or a clip right there, because that was the last end. It's always kind of the hardest. But now I'm going to start sewing, and I will be closing these up so it won't look quite as disjointed as it does right now. So I have finished sewing all of the binding on. So now we can turn it over and add our hanging sleeve. I'm taking the 9.5 inch by 4 inch piece of fabric, and I folded in the ends once 1/4 of an inch and then another time 1/4 of an inch and sewed. I did that both short ends, and then I folded in half so that my folded end was inside, and then I sewed about 1/4 of an inch, just a running stitch. These stitches don't have to be pretty, and you can use a sewing machine too, but I did everything by hand and did 1/4 of an inch all the way down, and then pressed the seam open, and you can see it makes another crease up top so that we are going to sew. We're going to pin and sew, and we're going to sew just a little whip stitch on the top and on the bottom. So I've finished sewing on the sleeve with just the simple whip stitch on each side, and you can see that there's a little bit of an opening. And I'm going to use this stick. You can use whatever you can find. I just found this outside. I'm going to put it through. And then some twine. I'm going to cut maybe like 15, 20-ish inches, however long you want. And I'm going to have a finished wall hanging. I hope you enjoyed this video, and there's a lot of techniques learned, applique, English paper piecing, doing the binding and quilting, and I had a lot of fun designing this.